addiction. The word comes from the Latin addicere, which means to consecrate, devote, or sacrifice. Countless lives, families, and communities have been sacrificed to drug and alcohol addiction. For those who suffer from addiction, the condition can feel inescapable. It's been described as a cycle of destruction and regret. But what is addiction? Is it a kind of spiritual bondage, or is it a disease? And what role can faith play in the recovery process? We'll explore these questions and more as we look at faith and recovery. Join us as we unlock the mysteries of the Church. Today, our country faces the widespread abuse of alcohol and drugs. This has spread like a cancer, devastating families and homes. Many of the manifestations of addiction, such as rage, loss of control, the sense of being trapped, bear a striking resemblance to accounts of demonic activity in the Bible. But is there a connection? In the Bible, drug use is repeatedly condemned. In the book of Revelation, for instance, as the author is discussing the sins of Babylon, we find the Greek word pharmakeia, which means drugs, spells, or potions. From the earliest days, the Church has warned against the dangers of drug and alcohol abuse, and today, Catholic churches are the most common location for recovery programs in the United States. Unfortunately, drug abuse in the United States is on the rise. The latest study conducted by the National Institute for Drug Abuse Statistics claims that the illicit use of drugs by American adults had increased from 8.3% to 9.4%. That's roughly 24.6 million Americans. Here on Staten Island, New York, the problem is even worse. In 2016, there were 8 reported cases of overdose in 8 days, 5 of which were fatal, bringing the total in 2016 to 90. Most of these cases involved heroin and methamphetamine. We're here at Our Lady Star of the Sea Parish in Staten Island, New York, to learn about what the Church and local community is doing about this epidemic through education, prayer, and faith. We'll speak with Monsignor Jeffrey Conway, who holds a regular recovery mass and offers his unwavering support to the Staten Island community.
Have mercy on us, Lamb of God, you take away the sins of the world.
As an alcoholic, my faith was in alcohol. I mean, theoretically, my faith was in God. I believed in Jesus, but I didn't act it. I acted like I believed in alcohol. If I needed anything special in order to get through a difficult situation, I drank more. One morning, I just was crying, and I asked God to make it stop. And I said, whatever you want to do, just make it stop. And that was October 15th, 1979, and that was the last day I drank. And then I come into recovery, and I find out that I have to replace the alcohol with something, and the something is God. If anybody wants to get better, they have to replace the drug with a higher power, God, and that will give us the power not to have to continue in our addiction.
To learn about the psychology of addiction, we talked with NYU's Dr. Zoran Josipovic.
So addiction is a very complex phenomenon. It's pervasive in our species. It actually is common to most mammal species, that we can all be addicted. And there are many different facets to it and many different causes that contribute to addiction. At a very basic level, we can say that there is a genetic predisposition there is a lack of availability of certain receptors in the brain that predispose one to addictive behavior. Motivating mechanisms in the brain that propels us to seek things, to explore new things, to feel that reward. That mechanism, which depends on dopamine, can be co-opted by addiction. It can be co-opted directly by something that directly elevates dopamine, like a cocaine, or very indirectly, like something like buying shoes or something like that. Once that happens, the cycle progresses through its stages. But of course, there are very well-known spirituality-based methods for treating addiction, like Alcoholics Anonymous and others, which are a combination of many different factors. In addition to a spiritual component, there is a factor of a group support. Definitely, just as disease is multidimensional, the intervention has to be multidimensional.
On Staten Island, we really have a difficult time. We've had more than 90 people overdose in this year, and last year, 2016. And that's only a part of it, because those are the ones that are reported. Because I know of others that don't make it into the papers as being overdoses. And I asked the people at the funeral home what's the cause of this 20-year-old dying. And they say, we haven't gotten the toxicology report yet. So that tells me that they know it was an overdose, they just don't know what they overdosed on. The devil is pleased, and maybe has some kind of activity involved in making that come about, but I don't really know. When a person is an alcoholic, they sometimes go into blackouts and they don't remember anything. Mm-hmm. When a person is possessed by the devil, when the possession takes over, mm-hmm. they don't remember anything. There are similarities. Well, the recovery mass is just something that we decided we would do for people because they were coming to the healing masses that we had in the regular parishes. We had a healing mass here at Our Lady Star of the Sea, and we had one at St. Patrick's, and they were coming to the masses there. And we thought we could do one that would be special for recovering people. We thought this was a good way for them to get blessed by God and to receive a healing, because we need healing. We've been badly beaten by the disease or by living with somebody with the disease, and we need healing. In the addiction, we pull away from God, because the addiction is almost like a possession. It's like being possessed by the drug or the alcohol, and it pulls us away from God. God is constantly calling us back, but he's using people to do it. He's using me, he's using other people who are recovering. It's Jesus given the power of his Holy Spirit. And that's the power, that's why they fall, because they're overcome by this power that hits them. Just like the demons, when they're in a building, in somebody's room, it gets icy cold. The opposite is the Spirit. It's warm. You get the warmth and the heat of the Holy Spirit, and that's what they feel. That's what I feel too.
Coming up, we will talk with addicts and experts about addiction, temptation, demons, and recovery. Stay tuned for more Mysteries of the Church.
Although there may be no direct link between the devil and addiction, for an addict it often can feel as if there is. We spoke with a young woman in recovery who claims that when you're addicted, it feels as if you have no control. It warps your true personality and harms those closest to you.
Is the devil associated with addiction? Yeah, because it takes over your mind and your soul, and it like repels you from being around good people. When I was about 4 or 5 years old, my father was arrested for organized crime and money laundering, for working with Pablo Escobar. He was bringing kilos of cocaine in from Colombia, and he was a very dark man at the time. Now, of course, being a 4-year-old, I didn't really know that was happening, but I I got kind of caught up in the mix of it. So when I was about 13 years old, I started drinking. I would take it out of my mom's cabinet, the Goldschlager, and I would drink and I would cut myself, and that would alleviate the pain that I was feeling inside for the moment. And then I would just, drink like a whole bottle of alcohol, like to myself at 13 or 14 years old. I took my first pill at 14. My father came home from prison when I was about 14, so he came home right when I was beginning my drug use. And my father, when he was in prison, he actually turned his life around. He read like thousands of books. He became part of the religious community at the jail. So I was like, well, how can I get away from my parents? I know, I'll be a drug dealer. So I decided to sell drugs so I could make fast money and I could get my own apartment and move away from my mother and get away from my father. I saw the money and the drugs and the music and all these things, and I thought, okay, great, this is gonna be my life. I had gone to rehab one time, and they said, when I was in rehab, a couple of the clients that were there told me about heroin. They were like, oh, it's cheaper, it's better. I started doing heroin a couple of weeks later with someone that I had met in a rehab center. So I tried it and I fell in love with it because immediately I didn't have to feel any pain and I didn't really have to deal with my issues. I didn't have to deal with rejection. I didn't have to deal with fear. I didn't have to deal with any negative emotion that I had. I never had to deal with. I lived in the streets in Brooklyn. I lived with my drug dealer. I would sleep, in abandoned buildings. I would sleep at the train station. I believed like that, the consciousness that I had, that was my only way to live.
The bad angels, the demons, they cannot control you and they cannot read your thoughts. They don't have that power. But what they can do in a spiritual way is they can pressure you. They can tempt you. They can oppress you with such great temptation. Almost like somebody really is whispering in your ear these thoughts, like you're not good enough, you don't deserve anything good, you're a failure. And they tempt you, how about doing these other things, which are actually self-destructive, but they're tempting you. They want your soul. They want to take you away from God. And once you understand that, you reject it. You pray, you ask for guidance from Mary, and you ask for guidance from your guardian angel and all the people in your lives, and you start to see things in a whole new light.
Now, it's important to distinguish a spiritual disorder like immorality from a psychological or physiological illness like drug or alcohol addiction. According to Lisa Gantz, the clinical director of the Long Island Council for Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, addicts are not bad people. In fact, the stigma of being somehow corrupt or immoral keeps many addicts from seeking the treatment that they need.
So addiction, when you really want to boil it down, is about obsessions and compulsions. An obsession is a recycled thought. I need another, I need another, I need another. A compulsion, a repetitive behavior. I take another, I take another, I do another. And as that progresses, or as that process progresses, it gets worse over time. They're sick people. They need treatment. They can get better. Sobriety is a real thing. Recovery is a real thing. Helping each other is a huge part of that. But also believing in something bigger than yourself, that you can't fight this on your own. That it's done together, and that for many people, not all, but many, find help through prayer, through meditation, and through an understanding of a higher power. There's quite a few things that get in the way, and one of the major things is stigma, that people don't reach out for help because they do think something is wrong with them and that they're a bad person. And part of where I work, the Long Island Council, is dedicated to fighting that stigma so that people realize that there is help, and it's not a moral failing, and they can get better, and there are resources to help.
I found my relationship with God when I went to rehab. I went to rehab when I was 22. I chose to go there. I admitted that I was an addict and I didn't want to live how I was living anymore. I couldn't take it anymore. It was just constant pain and suffering. But I was done with the way I was doing things, so I listened to the people at the rehab. I was in withdrawals for about 60 to 90 days, and eventually it went away, and the cravings went away. So I believed that God took my cravings away eventually, but not when I wanted it, when He saw fit. But I know that going back to the dark side, to the devil, to drugs, particularly heroin or opioids, that everything in my life today will be taken away from me like this.
Certainly as human beings have free will, and yet sometimes we're wired in such a way, it would seem, that this addictive behavior gets one up on us. Is there the devil out there? I believe. Evil spirits? Of course. But you know what? As Catholics, we believe that we have the power of the Holy Spirit. We just don't want to say, well, the devil made me do it. Because God has given us free will and often a power to choose through the support of others and maybe making some good decisions in ourselves that we can draw from the power that Christ gives us to help us deal with some of these addictions and behaviors. And whether it's, drugs or alcohol, gambling, smoking, overeating, a lot of these things affect all of us. But if we're honest with ourselves, we all have maybe addictions that we need to be weaned from in order that Christ and God's love can fill us up.
Coming up, we will speak with a group of dedicated Christians who work the 12 steps to find sobriety and a higher power. Stay tuned for more Mysteries of the Church.
Thank you.
And again.
I'm really grateful that you all could come and share your own experience and recovery and faith with us.
The beginning for me was knowing that God really is in charge of my life, a step at a time.
The grace is always there. It's a matter of accepting it and being open to the things you have to do.
People close to me, family members struggle from addiction. I had somebody close to me, I helped their, girlfriend get into a rehab, and so much, there was fighting or whatever, and she got out of rehab, and she got out about 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Thursday, and, she was dead by 1 o'clock in the morning. When I got home that day, there was a thank you note in the mailbox that she had written before she left treatment. And, to me, that wasn't a coincidence. And I've used that letter in the recovery community to help other people. Because one of the things I found for people that suffer from addiction, they'll help you before they can even help themselves.
I know that God's will for me is what I need to do. And with that, there are days where I'm so overwhelmed, I'll be driving my car, and just all of a sudden I'll cry. Not from a sad place, but from a place of, it happened for me.
I think that when you get into a recovery meeting and program and stuff, people help you to see that God has been there loving you. And one of the things I think that the early pioneers of this stuff were brilliant about is you come into recovery and you learn spirituality that's not attached to anything except feeling better, feeling peace, however it manifests itself.
Katie said something about she was driving a car and she was in a great mood and she decided to start crying, or she got that feeling of crying, overwhelmed. I see James when he shares at meetings and the tearing up that he has. And that's the movement of God within us, the Holy Spirit. And that's a very comforting feeling for me.
I burnt my life down. That's the very tool I can use with a newcomer to get them. See, in our book, it calls it, our story has to have depth and weight for it to mean something, so that person feels comfortable. That person then knows she's been where I've been.
Challenge now for me is, how do I keep it stopped? And for me, and I believe for a lot of people, it's a series of making good decisions.
Thanks so much for sharing your stories in perspective. I'm sure it'll help a lot of people.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Our pleasure.
I hope so.
The evil one convinces us that bad things are good. The evil one can lead us into destructive activity. That activity can become paralyzing. We're not sure where to go. The 12th step of Alcoholics Anonymous, let go, let God. When we crash and burn and are paralyzed beyond anything we can begin to imagine, there is that opportunity to experience deliverance. Remember the great prayer of Saint Faustina, who gives us the devotion to the divine mercy. Jesus, I trust in you. Have we ever stopped to think about those 5 words? Jesus, I trust in you. We give him permission to come into the chaos, to come into that trial, to come across those stormy waters. And as he lifted Peter right above the waves when he began to sink, to do the same thing for you and for me and for all of us. That divine intervention of grace can make an extraordinary change. It happens throughout this city, throughout this nation, throughout the world, one soul at a time. Jesus, I trust in you.
Addiction robs people of their freedom. It's a disease which traps people in a cycle of destruction. But as we've seen, recovery is possible. And for many, faith plays a vital role in that process. In 2013, Pope Francis visited the drug wing of St. Francis of Assisi Hospital. He told the patients there, do not be robbed of hope. Rather, become bearers of hope. Look ahead with confidence, because you're never alone. Thanks for joining us, and tune in next time as we unlock more mysteries of the Church.